A lonely book sits in the sand, the wind blowing its pages. What is this book doing here on this British beach? What does it mean? Well, that's what we're here to find out. Instructions for American Servicemen in Britain, 1942. Watch until the end to get the link to download the PDF.
And they tell us
it is manifestly ridiculous for the warmonger Roosevelt to tell the American people that they have anything in common with the British. On the contrary, they are different in every respect.
well, there are differences, that's true. For instance, we drive on the right side of the road, but in Britain, we go for baseball. They have a little number called cricket.
Very well played, sir.
And anyone who ever drank coffee over there knows why there'll always be an England.
Is your coffee all right, sir?
Give us a glass of half and half. Have you heard about it, boys? Give us another glass of half and half. Blimey, you'd have thought it happened to poor old Bill. And another bloke here.
So I went in to sup my dinner, but it's that and buckets and I was getting swarch. Lad, that's bad.
Among Tchaikovsky's smaller pianoforte works are past.
Are they kidding, Jack? Why the cockamamie sprinkling some schmaltz mixed with celery tonic?
Why do they all mush so much with corn pone in their mouth? You all can't understand a word they say.
Yes, there are differences.
Once the United States entered the war in late 1941, the War Department in Washington, D.C. knew that they'd be shipping American soldiers to the United Kingdom the next year. Therefore, they knew that their gum-smacking, girl-chasing soldiers would run into the British public at some point, and they wanted them prepared for the inevitable culture shock. This pamphlet was given to American soldiers to help them understand their new ally in his country. It also appears to strive to strengthen the relationship by being upfront about the differences and also stressing the commonalities. There are subjects like not discussing old wars. It mentions that the British are reserved, not unfriendly. The reason mentioned is because so many of them are crowded on their island, and they guard their privacy carefully. That sounds like good advice, doesn't it? The British have phrases that may sound funny to you. Sometimes American phrases sound funny to Americans too, so that's no surprise.
Maybe you thought John Britain sat there and waited for us to send him planes and guns and tanks. Well, he's deeply grateful for what our Lend-Lease did for him. It saved his skin when he was in a tough spot. But today, Lend-Lease works in more ways than one. For today, John Britain himself furnishes planes and guns and tanks through the same Lend-Lease to us, to Russia, and his other allies all over the world. In Britain alone, our forces have received, free from the British, 1.5 million tons of food, clothing, and munitions, and 2.5 million tons of other materials. There's another thing you ought to know about Britain. If your unit gets sent there, you probably won't be invited out for supper or for a drink. That's not because the British don't want to entertain you. They haven't anything to entertain you with. Britain is mobilized for war, total war, and that means an end to civilian supplies. If you were a Britisher, you wouldn't expect your girl to use lipstick. There isn't any, except what we bring over as bait. She wouldn't be smartly dressed, for clothes are rationed, severely rationed. It's very unlikely she wears stockings, for if she bought a pair of stockings a month, that would be all the clothes of any kind she could buy. That's some rationing. We think our gas rationing is tough, but John Britain gets no gas at all. He goes to a pub to buy a bottle of whiskey. The pub keeper laughs in his face. Grain is needed for industrial alcohol. Industrial alcohol is needed for munitions. And nearly all the reserve stock of British whiskey is kept for sale to America to pay for the goods Britain buys here. For don't forget, besides Lend-Lease, Britain buys and pays for vast quantities of goods. And it was the cash purchases that Britain made before we entered the war that gave our munitions industry its start and enabled us to build it up in record time.
As this portion mentions, the British had already been through a lot from the war. It is always impolite to criticize your host. It is militarily stupid to insult your allies. Don't be a show-off. The British dislike bragging and showing off. It's true that the average American soldier's pay was high. Even in modern times, there are some Americans that like to flash the cash or wear the gold bling, but this behavior, whether in wartime or not, was against British reserve culture. Use common sense and don't throw it in Tommy's face. The British are tough. This portion goes to show you that some American phrases change over time, and this shows one that definitely is out of usage. 60,000 British civilians have died under bombs, yet the morale of the British is unbreakable and high. The British are tough, strong people and good allies. The British have theaters and movies, which they call cinemas, as we do, but the great place of recreation is the pub. A pub, or public house, is what we would call a bar or tavern. The best way to get on in Britain is very much the same as the best way to get on in America. They're basically saying, be a decent bloke, or mate, or something like that to your other mates, or friends. This part is really funny. They are not given to backslapping. Although it has gone out of favor, it wasn't that long ago where a firm handshake and a small slap on the back were very common in the United States, especially in the business world. The British like sports. They love to shoot. They ride horses, and you could even say that sometimes they chase a little fox around while blowing a horn, but that last part is not in the pamphlet. There's some emphasis on cricket matches, soccer, and rugger. In America, we call it rugby, and many people know about it. You will naturally be interested in getting to know your opposite number, the British soldier, the Tommy, you have heard and read about. You can understand that 2 actions on your part will slow up the friendship: swiping his girl and not appreciating what his army has been up against. Yes, and rubbing it in that you are better paid than he is. The British don't know how to make a good cup of coffee. You don't know how to make a good cup of tea. It's an even swap. There's an interesting section about American language and English, about different accents and how, even in America, people sometimes have a hard time understanding each other. This is very true. The first time my wife and I went to Louisiana, she couldn't really understand the locals. I had lost my voice and knew what they were saying, but I had to translate to her in whispers.
It is not given to us to peer into the mysteries of the future. Still I avow my hope and faith, sure and inviolate, that in the days to come, the British and American peoples will, for their own safety and for the good of all, work together in majesty, in justice, and in peace.
This is what the British are fighting for. They are an old people, a stubborn people, and sometimes they have moved slowly. But in 3 years of blood and sweat and tears, John Britain has found his soul. Now he is tough. Now he is determined, and now he knows where he is marching, to victory and to a new world. He's a good man to have on our team.
And British alike were celebrating the end of the most terrible war the world had ever seen. The English people and their American allies could relax again after the relentless hammering that their fascist enemies had given them. Britain began to clear up war's ruins and to plan rebuilding for peacetime pursuits.
Here is how you can download the pamphlet for free and peruse it at your leisure. There are still more funny sayings in the full pamphlet. I hope you enjoyed this video. Put it in the comments how you felt about it.